Welcome to Colonie TV, the governmental educational channel for the town of Colonie.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Top of the day, I'm Joe Doolittle.
And I'm Kate Dudding.
And this is Story by Story.
Sharing the human experience.
Wow, we've done that a few times, and I have very rarely messed it up the way I did just now. But we are here with you, and we're glad you're here because, you know, without listeners or viewers, there's nobody to hear our stories. And we've got a wonderful storyteller to kind of enthrall you a little bit later. But right now we're talking about storytelling here in the Capital District, which is alive and well. And we've got some things we'll talk about in terms of coming up. But what's the best moment in storytelling you've had, my friend and storyteller buddy?
Well, I told to the Hillside Elementary School in Niskayuna stories about young people who made a difference. And they caught on right away to this African, we're stumbling today, it's a live show, this African proverb. And I got the signing of it from Barbara Alaprantis in New York City.
Ah.
If many little people in many little places do many little things, they can change the world. Yeah, you got it.
That's a great one. You must have had a lot of fun with that story.
Well, when you have 300 kids doing it with you.
Oh, man. Boy, isn't it, you know, it's kind of amazing when you have 300 kids and they're turned on to your story and they applaud or cheer or did those kids kind of do that for you?
Yes. In fact, you know, I went, you know, first I taught them the words and I said, well, then we can do it with signs too. We did it with signs as an echo. And I said, and then I used it as a reprise between the stories. And I said, let's do that, this is an echo. And so I did the first line and they all did it all with me, the words and the sign. I said, I guess we don't have to do it as an echo.
Don't have to do it as an echo, right.
I hadn't taught this before, so I didn't know how quickly kids could pick this up, but you have, so.
Well, what a great memory that is. I actually have a story I tell about telling at Hillside School.
Oh.
And I won't tell it now, but it's got to do with the red nose. And the time I told one of my good friends, Dave Bundy, was the phys ed teacher at Hillside. He's also the soccer coach, or was at Niskayuna High School. So I said I would come, but I wanted to nose Mr. Bundy with one of my red noses. And she, you know, and I said I couldn't show up without noses for everybody. How many kids would there be? She said about 300, and I said, well, you're going to have to raise your fee because that's more than I can. So I had a big box, and when I called him up to do his little shtick, he didn't know it was coming, but then I nosed him, and everybody went, wow, and I said, you know, if I had more noses, I could nose everybody. And I sent him over to this little box, and he picked up this box and pulled out a bag of 50 noses, and the place went crazy, and we nosed all those kids. But Dave had the good sense to have everybody go back to their classrooms, so we went in classrooms and nosed kids. So, but it was one of my finer moments. And now you've got that story.
Yes, I was going to say, what didn't you tell us?
Well, I have just I had a real honor. You know, sometimes as storytellers, we like to encourage people to tell their own stories. And we do it in hospital settings, we do it in other settings. I did it in a post-service program at my church, First Reform in Schenectady.
What's a... Oh, after the service.
After
Okay.
you know, after coffee and stuff. And it was stories of our mothers. And I told a very short story about my mom, who was a very quirky and special lady. And then I told a poem, and I don't have the poem with you, but it was by a dear friend. And the essence of the poem was about she and her mother in a church pew when she was 5. And she describes being a bored kid in the church pew, and how her mother slips her a candy, and how she unwraps the candy and tastes the candy, and its lemony flavor as the first taste of God. And I read that poem, and there were a room full of people, and people just shot up to tell stories about their mother. And there was just, I didn't have to do anything but just kind of sit there and point, and they were just kind of there, because it was, as we say in the trade, it was great bubble up, you know? It was so.
The first story I thought of my mother was, we were in the very proper bank in downtown Fairfield. The center of Fairfield.
Center of Fairfield.
Fairfield isn't quite big enough to have a downtown, but in the center of Fairfield, the one with the brick and the pillars and all that. And my brother and I started fighting. And she looked at us. She was done with what she had to do. She looked at us. She said something like, "I'm disgusted with you," and she walked out the door, the revolving door.
She abandoned you in downtown Fairfield?
And my brother and I went, "Whoops."
Overstepped it there, didn't we? Now, my friends and listeners, what's just been going on here is banter on one level. It's also a good example of how story weaves itself within your lives, or can, by listening to something that's a provocative question, or thinking about stories of your mom or your dad, and harvesting those stories can be fun for families or fun for friends. So when we first started the show in our stammering way, and we said, "Gee whiz, what's going on in storytelling?" You said, "Oh, nothing's going on in storytelling, probably." But there's magic going on in storytelling. Right here in our town, in your own living room and kitchens. So practice, practice, practice. And we'll talk more about how you might get engaged with Story Circle later on. But you know, we have somebody who came a far piece to be here today.
And he contacted us before he even was close.
He did that?
Yes, he did. We had an email conversation going on back and forth.
You mean before he moved to the said locale?
Yes, indeed.
Wow. Now, we want to bring in and introduce you to Gil Payette, who is a dear friend. He's become a dear friend since he's returned back east from where he had his career in public service in Arizona.
Yes.
And Gil, you're here with us, and we're pleased. We're great. It's good to see you. And
it's good to be seen.
Good to be seen. Yes.
And I'm glad to be here with the Story Circle.
And you could take a guy out of the Troy area and take him to Arizona, but you can't take the Arizona out of the Troy boy when he moves back.
No.
Isn't that interesting?
It's a dehydration process.
It's a dehydration process. I never looked at it that way.
The desert stays with you.
Long time. So keep your hat on, because you never quite know when.
Well.
Yeah.
Now, Gil, you grew up in
Cohoes.
Cohoes. The falls at Cohoes.
Yes.
Famous. They've got a mystical sense to them too. And then, how long were you out west?
Let me go back a moment. I left Cohoes right after school. Mm-hmm. So I was gone over 50 years. Mm-hmm. I was in Arizona near 14, 15 years.
14, 15 years. Wow, good for you. And I can remember some of the stories about you telling stories at Sabina Canyon and other places with the National Park Service. But when did becoming or realizing that you were a storyteller hit you? When did that discovery happen?
Well, one of the things I tell people is everybody tells stories.
That's true.
Yes.
That's true. That's true.
So all through life, whether I was working or whatever area I was in, you would sit around and everybody would exchange stories. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean you're a card-carrying storyteller. Mm-hmm. That happened in Tucson, and it happened with the Forest Service. Oh. I belonged to a group called Sabino Canyon Volunteer Naturalists. And among the things that we used to do was school programs as day trips for the children, mm-hmm. kindergarten through 6th grade. And in the summertime, inside the visitor center, there was a story program every Wednesday during June and July. As I got involved with the volunteer naturalist, I started telling stories to the kindergartners with puppets on Tuesday morning.
Ah.
And then I was invited to come in to the story group for the summer Wednesdays.
Summer Wednesday.
The same woman who developed the program for the summer also originated Tellers of Tales in Arizona. So she invited me to go over to Tellers of Tales, where I sat with storytellers and listened to them for about a year before I got up and started doing stories on my own.
So Tellers of Tales is their local guild?
Yes.
Ah.
35 years, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Excellent.
It's interesting. The National Storytelling Network is meeting in Arizona, actually up in Phoenix.
Yes.
And I'm not. You're going to go to that
Yeah,
meeting.
their conference, they have an annual conference, and this year it's in the Phoenix Mesa area.
And what was intriguing to me is that one of the subgroups, the Healing Storytelling Alliance, has kind of partnered to showcase a program within the community college, the Mountain View Community College, which is part of the county system.
Is it South Mountain?
South Mountain, South.
Yes.
And they have a 2-year associate's degree certificate program in storytelling, and some wonderful faculty.
Yes.
And it's just and later we'll talk a little bit about that. There's a website for a conference call we just did with the faculty on the Healing Storytelling Alliance. But did you get up there? I mean, it's a little ways from Tucson to Phoenix, but.
I have been up in the Phoenix area.
Yeah.
I've told stories up in the
Okay.
Phoenix area. And I looked into the program at South Mountain.
South Mountain.
But I would have had to relocate, so
Yeah.
I didn't do that. But you could get a certificate in storytelling
Right.
just by taking their storytelling program. But if you went through the humanities department, you could get an associate degree
Right. Right.
with storytelling as part of the degree.
And they have well, it's it's a great. It's one of the few places that I know that's actually got that kind of depth for storytelling, and a lot of it's grown out of the Native American traditions that are in the Southwest too, which is kind of fun. So
Living Desert.
living desert.
Yes.
Desert.
And another one is ETSU, which I've just thought of what that stands for, Eastern Tennessee State University in Johnson City, Tennessee. In Eastern Tennessee, I guess you figured that out. But I think they offer a bachelor, they offer a master's degree.
A master's degree and a,
Right.
and a teaching certificate, actually, too, I think, in education. So there, if you're interested in those, we bring them up because it's nice to know that there's some formal programs for storytelling. And some of us even have gone through them. You know, no, I didn't mean it that way.
But we've been talking about storytelling. We had little snippets of
That's right.
more anecdotes.
Right.
But I think Gil has some actual
Stories.
to share
Holy
with us.
crow, isn't that going to be fun?
Let's hope it is.
Let's hope it is. It will be. It will.
My name is Gil Payette. I am a storyteller. I retell stories from Native American folklore, based on my understanding of the myths, legends, and stories of the Native American people. There is a story from southern Arizona. It is a legacy of the Tohono O'odham people, the desert people. The story is in a small book. And I want to tell you a story about the book and the author before I tell you what the Tohono O'odham told their children. There is a 90-year-old woman who lives in Arivaca, Arizona. She lives in an adobe house with no electricity and 3 manual typewriters. Her name is Bird Baylor. For all of her adult life, she has been a school teacher and an author. She has taught school in tribal schools and in public schools with a high population of Native American children. She has written many books about the children, about the people, and about the desert. One of the books is called "And It Is Still That Way." In that book, there is a short story, maybe 5-6 paragraphs, called "How the Papago Got Some Shade." The book was put together because she asked kindergartners and first graders to come in for show and tell and to tell stories that their grandparents tell them at home. So each story has a tribal affiliation and a school affiliation. Back in the 70s, when the book was first written, the name Papago was used for one of the nations in southeastern Arizona. But Papago goes back to the days of the Spanish conquistadors. When the Spanish met these native people, part of their diet was gathering mesquite beans and cultivating tepary beans. The Spanish called them bean eaters, Papago. It was not a compliment. In their language, they are the Tohono O'odham. Tohono means desert, O'odham means people. They are the people of the desert. So today, to be politically correct, the story would be called "How the People Got Some Shade." I tell the story under the title, "Snake is Dying." Snake was a great spirit in the desert. Snake knew the mysteries of the desert. There was a time before what we call history when Snake called the healers to him, the great animals, the buffalo, the bear, the eagle, and had counsel with them. Everyone waited to see what the outcome of their talks would be. 4 days later, Snake came out to address all the animals gathered, the four-legged ones, the ones that fly, the ones that crawl, and he told them that his days among them was limited, that he must prepare for his journey to the sky world. His family was grief-stricken, and his friends were very, very sad. You see, Snake was dying. They would do anything for their friend in his last days. But the first one to speak was Desert Tortoise. And Desert Tortoise said that his people had always found shelter, always had a resting place in a shallow hole in the ground. And this is what they would do with their friend Snake. The next to speak was Jack Rabbit. And Jack Rabbit said his father and his father's father before him told them that they took shelter under the plants. They were a windbreak. They were a resting place. And this is what they should do for their friend. And then the last to speak was Coyote. Coyote said, "We have been here since the creation. My people have been everywhere. We have seen the humans and where they live, what they use for shelters, where they rest. They have been in cliff dwellings. They have been in pit houses. They have been in teepees, wickiups. They have been in longhouses. This is what we will do for our friend." So each of these three animals, Desert Tortoise built a shallow resting place. Jack Rabbit built a windbreak under a mesquite tree, and Coyote built a 4-post structure with just a top, no walls. Snake was brought and shown what they had done. I must tell you, Snake was moved by what his friends did for him. Snake cried at everything that was done, and he said these things would be used, save them. For many, many days, Snake sat under the structure that Coyote had built. It was called a wata, which means shade. Any of the animals would come and talk with Snake. But Snake did die. They took his body and they placed it in a shallow hole. They covered it with rocks from the mountains in all 4 sacred directions. They took their prayer bundles, their prayer sticks, their prayer feathers, and they placed them on the mesquite tree. It became an altar to their friend. And anyone who wanted to come and remember Snake would sit under the wata in the shade and think of their friend, look at their beloved desert, and be able to see in all 4 sacred directions. One day, people came up the wash, the dry riverbed, and they saw these 3 things. They did not know what they were, but they knew they were special. Maybe they were sacred. They went back down the wash, respected everything, left it the way it was. But when they got back to their encampment, to their villages, to their settlements, they remembered the structure. And they built some for themselves. Wata, shade. They sat under them. They prepared their food. They made baskets. They made pottery. They talked with their friends. They sat in the shade and they rest. And that is how the people got some shade.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Now warm me up a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's this is an appreciation from the Interfaith Story Circle. For some reason,
Do this?
They do well. They do this.
The sign language is
It's
this is
right.
applause.
Right, but I think applause is too much thanking people for a performance as opposed to sharing
Right.
something
Right.
holy.
Yeah,
Sure.
and that's why I've learned it was from there, and so that's in that context,
Yeah,
and I thought
yeah.
that fit.
There you go.
Oh,
Aye, aye.
aye. No, wow, and the understanding about finding shade and actually making shade sacred in the desert, which is pretty significant. Just great. And I had never Tohono Ono
O-O-tam.
Otam.
2 O's.
Tohono
O-O-tam.
Otam.
Yeah.
I had never heard the crossover, if you will. I always thought it was 2 different tribes when I heard the Papago until you did that explanation on it. So and unlike many of your tellers back in the East, I have actually been in Arivaca, Arizona.
Have you really?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's on the back road around to what's that?
To Arivaca, you don't go anywhere.
Well, no, but there's a dirt road that goes over
Yes.
to right along the border to not Juarez, whatever the crossing point is there, and I've been on that road, which is back in the you're way beyond the
Back in the
resumed
desert.
speed
Yeah.
signs out there.
It says a lot that Bird Baylor still lives in an adobe home
Right.
with no electricity.
Right.
There are places,
Yeah.
like that today
Yeah.
in Arizona on the tribal lands,
Yeah.
just like that. Yeah.
There's, I heard a storyteller from, I believe, Arizona, Sunny, can't remember her last name, don't remember the tribe, but she lives in the tribal way, and she mentioned that every time she enters what she called the white world, it was always a jerk, and that she missed the rituals that she went through, that when entering her home, maybe she was Navajo, because I sort of remember, there was a ritual she did that, and it's not done here. So she had holes all over her life when she's not on her reservation.
You know, in terms of the author and her harvest of these stories, when did you meet her? When did you pick the story up, and how?
I have never met
Oh.
Bird Baylor. I would have liked to.
Okay.
My dream was, while I was building venues for my storytelling, is that she would be in attendance one day, and she would hear me tell that story and smile. That's all I wanted, was a smile. But I came across the book because it was in the visitor center at Sabino Canyon. And we used it for a number of the summer story time programs, because the stories are 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. They're very, very short. They're all by children. They're all about the desert. So it was easy to apply them to the program. But it was the first formal story I told, and it came out of that book.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
I had told one story before, and it was with the Tellers of Tales, and it was my first formal storytelling. And at that point, it was at night in Sabino Canyon at Telling Rock with a full moon. Ooh. And I talked about skinwalkers, shape shifters, shape changers, Navajo witches.
I didn't know that there was a Telling Rock in Sabina Canyon.
Well, you have to know one of the tellers.
I have to know one of
The
those.
Forest Service doesn't label it Telling Rock,
Ah.
but if you talk to one of the tellers, they'll take you up and show you the Telling Rock.
Oh, that's good. Next time.
And is that their telling rock, or?
No, it's in one of the education areas off of the tram road, and it's where the kindergarten program was scheduled.
Okay.
There just happens to be a big rock where the school buses turn around. So we would use that rock from the kindergarten program as Telling Rock.
You know who we haven't had on? We haven't had on Bruce Hiscock. And the reason I mention that is he has a book called The Old Rock.
The Old Rock.
And up in the Adirondacks.
Yep,
And
yep.
he goes through, he's an author-illustrator, and he goes through the geological formation of that old rock. But in a magical story, like, not magical.
Well, magic.
Well, you know, taking something that can be as dry as geology,
Yeah.
and breathing life into it, I guess.
Yeah,
Well, there's an old legacy about the Story Rock or the Telling Rock, where since the rocks are the bones of the earth and one of the oldest parts of the earth, the rocks know all the stories. So you can go to the Telling Rock and you can learn your stories.
And they're very good at listening. They're,
Rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to, well, there's a lot, you can actually tell a lot of stories about rocks. I mean, you know, when I think about it like this one. And for those of you, we're kind of talking about Arizona and maybe indulging ourselves too much with our memories, but if you're ever in Tucson, Sabina Canyon is one of the priceless places to stop. And it isn't like you got to go forever because it's right outside the city, but it is mystical, magical,
yes.
It's what I like best about it is that in the desert it usually has flowing water. So you have the desert, but you also have the water coming down, and the tram, which carries you over, you can actually ride all the way up, or you can walk up, or you can ride up and walk down. But it's just delightful, and you can hike from where you end your ride, and it is just wonderful. Just wonderful.
It's a magical place. It really is. And it's one of the 3 or 4 must-see if you're down in that part of Arizona.
Right.
Now, is it in Mount Lemon, as I remember?
Mount Lemon is the peak of the Santa Catalina Mountains. And Sabino Canyon is the recreational area at the basin level.
Okay.
If you were
the water was coming down from. Yeah.
Yes, it does. If you were to hike all the way up, and you can, it's a difficult hike.
It's a long hike.
But you can hike up through Sabino Canyon, up above Sabino Canyon, and come out at any number of places, all the way on up to Mount Lemon.
My family went there years ago in February, and in Tucson it's about 60, you know. really nice. But then my husband found out Mount Lemon had snow on it. He said, "Let's go." I go, "No, we went away from the snow.
Right.
I didn't bring any mittens or gloves.
I'm not
or,
going up there.
What are you thinking of?"
Well, Lemon is 2 M's. It's named after a botanist, husband and wife family. And that was the resort. Summer Haven is one of the little towns up on. And there's a ski lodge up there where they used to have T-shirts that said "Ski the Lemon."
Ski the Lemon.
And a perfect day in Tucson would be in the winter to go up on a clear, beautiful, crisp day, ski one of the slopes. It's a very small resort, but ski one of the slopes, come back down and have a barbecue by the pool in Tucson in the basement level.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound too bad to me. Doesn't sound too bad to me. No. Well, Gil, if you'll just wait just a minute, take a deep breath, and we're going to talk a little bit about some things that are coming up with storytelling programs and other interesting things in the area. And Kate's going to do that for us.
Well, Gil gave us this wonderful list of his upcoming performances. And let's start. Oh, well, I was going to start. This is our July program. So what Gil did last month, which he really hasn't done quite yet, is that he was at the gallery opening at Bennington Center for the Arts. Art of the Animal Kingdom, the 19th gallery opening. It's a really big deal there. And he shared storytelling about the animal nation. So would this be one of the stories you're sharing?
Yes, but I'm going to do about a 15 or 20-minute version of the same story.
And so that in the rest of June, he's doing keynote programs at the Bennington Project Independence, Grafton Community Library, Grafton Senior Center. But in July, which is now in
Where we are.
or will be, at the Brunswick Community Library on Bastille Day, July 14th at 6:30 p.m. He's doing a keynote program on the significance of 7 in Native American stories.
Correct.
And then 2 weeks later, that's a Monday night, 2 weeks later on Monday, July 28th at 7 p.m. at the East Greenbush Community Library, he'll be doing a program on tribes of New York. And then he'll be back at East Greenbush in their powwow, the Gathering of Tribes, on both Saturday, September 6th, which is the weekend after Labor Day, and Sunday, September 7th, 10 to 6 and 10 to 5. You see these on your screen. Storytelling at the Learning Circle.
The interesting thing about that is that I will be telling a 15-minute story session every 2 hours on the hours for both days.
Wow. A 50 minutes?
15.
15. Oh,
Okay, 15 on, 45 off.
Sorry.
So you have time to eat and everything else one needs to do. Okay, excellent. So those are coming attractions you should definitely take advantage of.
Right.
Now, for the first Tuesday Tales and Stuff at Arthur's Market and Historic Coffee House in the Stockade in Schenectady, Marnie Gillard will be the storyteller on July 2nd. And the title of the program
Is Stories Jumping into Life.
Stories Jumping into Life.
Or Stories Diving into Life.
Diving into Life, okay. Because Marnie has a 2 CD
and we will have
package.
We will have some folks playing a little piano. We'll have a folk singer, and I'm going to bring some poems by a friend if I can't get my friend there to do the poems. So, and there's really another whole menu there these days with some nice dinner entrees. I had a lovely salmon the last time I was there. So, by all means, please come and support Arthur's Market and our adventure in the Stockade.
Okay. Now, the next Story Circle meeting will be right here at Colonie Town Library on Wednesday, July 15th, the day after Bastille Day, in case that has any meaning for you. I was a French major, so it's something I remember. And at 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., we share stories that are under development. Not underdeveloped, but
Underdeveloped. So if
being
you're
developed.
So if you're interested in kind of getting a taste of storytelling as a person who wants to maybe try telling stories or just learn more about it, that's a great place to start.
And a personal plug, I will be doing a program up just outside of the Lake George Village at the Weowaka Center for Women on Wednesday, August 27th at 4:30 p.m. American Women Artists of the 20th Century, talking about the Tiffany girls, the women who designed and made the Tiffany lamps, and designed some of the stained glass windows till the men said they were going to go out on strike if the women didn't just stay with the little lamps. Margaret Bourke-White, who was a photographer during the 30s and through 60s, she did this classic image of Mahatma Gandhi spinning, and also did the first cover of Life magazine.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't know.
And Georgia O'Keeffe, whom you probably know, and I've got this wonderful book where she comments on any number of her paintings.
Oh.
So that presentation is 25 of her paintings and what she said about them, not what the critics said, because for instance, the critics had Freudian analysis of those flowers that she did.
Those lilies,
right.
yes.
She said, "I paint my flowers so big so that even busy New Yorkers will stop and see what I see." So the last time I took a walk around my neighborhood, I stopped and looked at the irises and the petals, even the outside petals. I was looking at a purple one, pale purple. They had little magenta, very, very fine magenta veins coming out. And I'm not even talking about that cute little fuzzy, whatever it is, that comes out of the center and in a pale lemon color. And so that's why she did the big pictures.
Okay.
So much for the critics,
Now-
whom
now-
I don't think much of, which you can tell. Anyways, I
Well,
digress.
that should be a really popular program. I think so. It's got me intrigued.
Actually, I told Joe earlier that it's also being offered on July 8th, but it has already sold out. So I offered to do it a second time in
That's
August.
right. I think that's just
That's-
wonderful.
And it's followed by a dinner.
Wow.
So it's and Eileen
Yeah.
Mack.
Yes.
Keegan Mack?
Keegan Mack, yeah.
She's doing a program up there, two programs, one with her singing and one with her telling stories. So weowaka.org, and you can see how to spell Weowaka, but it's kind of like
Well,
it sounds, W-I-A-W-A-K-A.
Some other time we'll tell the story of Weowaka, because that in itself is a great story about women. So.
And Georgia O'Keeffe stayed there.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Oh, I didn't know.
before she married Stieglitz and stayed on the other side of the lake
Oh,
as his family's property. If you could also find us, and Gil's stories will eventually show up there on our website, storycircle@proctors.org. Click on YouTube. We have over now 100 stories, so that's
great.
like over 1,000 minutes of stories, which is hours.
It's a long time.
Long time.
So when the regular commercial TV gets dull and cable doesn't draw, go to our website and just pick a story.
And if you tell somebody about storytelling and they go, storytelling for adults? Is that X-rated? What are you talking about? Send them to our website so they can experience all different kinds of stories.
And no, we are not X-rated. Just for that.
Generally speaking, not.
Well, thank you, Kate. It's nice to have a few things going on here in our part of the world. Gil, have you got another story for us?
Yes, I do.
Oh, good. Oh,
Storyteller always has another story. I want to do the same thing that I did in the first story. I want to tell you a story, but I want to tell you a story about the story. I have been on a number of Native American cultural tours. It's just something I like to do. The first one that I went on was probably 10, 12 years ago. And it was the Four Corners Native American Cultural Tour. It was co-sponsored by St. Michael's Indian School near Window Rock, Arizona, and the Southwest Indian Foundation in Gallup, Arizona. If you went on the tour, you dealt with Sister Leola from St. Michael's. St. Michael's Catholic School has been on Navajo land since 1903. Sister Leola told you where to be, when to be there, and what to bring with you. Sister Leola ruled the tour. It went from Albuquerque, New Mexico, across to the Grand Canyon and back. You visited Pueblos, you visited Navajo, you visited Hopi, you were at Canyon de Chelly, Cañada del Norte, Monument Valley. We were in Albuquerque. We were in Old Town at the plaza. We had maybe 3 hours of free time. And Sister Leola had informed everyone at 1:15, you will be at this restaurant on this corner of the plaza. We will all eat together. I had been to Old Town a number of times, so I made a couple of circles, talked to a few people, purchased a few things, looked at some books. And when I came back, I noticed that Sister Leola was sitting on a park bench in the plaza in the shade. I thought about leaving her alone so she could just have some downtime, but there was also a lemonade stand there. So I asked her if she would like to have a lemonade. And we had a lemonade. And we were sitting quiet for a long time. And in light conversation, she asked what I did in Tucson. And I told her I was a storyteller. Sister Leola asked me to tell her a story. And we had a few minutes before we had to be at lunch. I told her a story that many, many tribes tell. It is normally accredited to the Cherokee people. It is a life lesson between a grandfather and his grandson. Many people know this story as the Two Wolves. A young boy came to his grandfather. He was very troubled. He asked his grandfather why things were not as they should be. Why would his friends want to do something they knew they were not supposed to be? And why did he feel so bad about not being with his friends? And his grandfather smiled and said, there is a battle going on inside of you. That same battle is inside of me and inside every other human. My son, it is like two wolves fighting. One wolf is good. He wants to do the right thing. He wants to walk the good road. And he wants you to lead a good life. The other wolf is bad. He wants to do bad things. He wants to walk the bad road. And he wants you to live a bad life. These two wolves are fighting. That is what you feel. You are feeling their battle, their war, their fight. And the boy sat, thought for a moment, and he asked, Grandfather, which wolf wins? The one that you feed. If you feed the good wolf, you lead the good life. If you feed the bad wolf, you feed the bad life. Sister Leola enjoyed that story, and she wanted to tell it to the children at St. Michael's. So every day on the tour, she would come and sit down by me on the bus and say, tell me that story about the two wolves. Part of the problem is when I tell stories, I never tell the story the same way twice. So I was probably confusing her a little bit. But we got it straightened out, and Sister Leola knew the story when the tour was over. A couple of years later, I got a letter from St. Michael's Indian School. It was from Brother Charles. Brother Charles was informing me that Sister Leola had passed. And I wrote a letter back to Brother Charles, essentially telling him what I have just told you. The next tour that I was on, Brother Charles sought me out and sat beside me on the bus, and he wanted to learn the story of the two wolves so he could tell it to the children at St. Michael's. And what I say to people at the end of that story is that Sister Loyola, Brother Charles, the Cherokee people, and I hope that your good wolf wins and that you lead the good life. That's the way it should be.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I just love it. And I can see you kind of sitting down with the lemonade and Sister Loyola, because Ignatius Loyola, he was the guy that started the Jesuit order, right? So
Yes.
he's the intellectual side of the church. So, and she was curious. And that's just a wonderful story.
So I assume that Sister Loyola and Brother Charles were both white, not Native American?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And Jesuit.
And Jesuit.
Yes.
But they knew where they were, what kind of stories that they should share.
Yes. And part of the tour took you to St. Michael's.
Ah,
You know, essentially, the tour was a fundraiser for the school.
cool, right.
But it was a wonderful experience to be on.
Yeah, I bet.
And it really is. A lot of times, people will ask me who my native voice is, because I tell Native American stories, and I don't profess to be a Native American. So they want to know who shares this information with you. Who do you learn these things from? Well, there are many, and the faculty and students of St. Michael's is only one of them. You know, I listen to so many of their words. Those are part of my native voices.
So you have several native voices.
No.
Yes.
You're drawn to all of them, I would guess.
To many, and I've had long conversations with some. There was a gentleman who was actually full-blood Mohawk from here in upstate New York, but he resides in South Dakota. His wife is full-blood Lakota. They have become the historians of Pine Ridge, and I see them every couple of years on a Native American cultural tool called Running Strong. And I sit and talk with them while we're on the bus. And he has a wonderful outlook because he is a northeastern woodland cultural Indian, and he's out in the Great Plains.
But I bet there are places where those stories touch
Oh yes.
from those two different traditions.
Oh yes, yes, yes. yes.
Two different worlds. I mean, more than just a tradition. It's where they live, I think, shapes the stories so much that a lot of them are what are pourquoi stories, why things are the way they are. And that is definitely shaped by the locality and the food and, everything indigenous. Weather.
I do a program called Many Moons, and it's Native American names for full moons. We all see the same full moon, whether we are on northeast, southeast coastal, Arizona desert, northwest Great Plains, but because of nature, we have different names for the moon. A snow moon does not have much meaning in Tucson.
Let me go over that again.
Go
I
over
don't
that.
think I followed that one.
The top of Mount Lemon. Remember the top of Mount Lemon?
yeah,
well,
but-
it took a long time for them to walk up there, so they.
Why would they walk up?
Why would they?
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Well, it's
Oh, and so I know. Well, Harvest Moon is
It's
a white term for the moon during October, September, October.
It's also a Native American term. Many Native Americans' harvest time is the beginning of their year,
Okay.
not the January.
Okay.
They-
But not the
everything
planting part,
starts-
the harvest.
Exactly.
Huh.
Yeah.
Hey,
Now, is that because the creator gave them these things, or?
Yes.
I would start with the
It-
egg rather than the chicken, but
Yes, it all
Oh, but-
feeds into that.
Oh,
Yes.
and in the Jewish faith, Rosh Hashanah is New Year's, and that's in September, and it's followed by the Day of Atonement, and then it's followed by Sukkot of the harvest. So it's kind of in a similar kind of
And there's a
liturgy, if you will.
There's a different rhythm to their calendar. In fact, here in this part of the world, the turtle was a symbol of a Native American calendar. It symbolized many other things, but that's a whole different story. But the outside platelets of the turtle, there are 28, signifying the 28 days between full moons. And the larger platelets that form the dome of the turtle, there are 13 for 13 months with 28 days separating the full moons.
lunar months.
Right.
Yeah.
And
But we
Iroquois,
don't have
and the Iroquois,
turtles in the desert. We have their cross cousin, the desert tortoise.
and the Iroquois believed that the Earth was actually created on the back of a giant turtle. So there you go,
This continent is often referred to as Turtle Island
Turtle Island.
because of that story.
There you go. There you go.
I digress. Terry Pratchett, I don't know if you've ever read any of his fantasy stuff. He's created a world, and with a turtle. The turtle, and someone was questioning the wise person on, well, what does the turtle stand on? And the answer was, it's turtles all the way down.
All the way down. All the way down. Just don't bother me with the details. Right?
Sorry, I digress. But
No, that was a nice digression. Now, one of your programs is stories from Indians or Native Americans in New York State. So
Yes.
is that something, since you've come home, have you begun to harvest stories from Eastern Indians, or what's happened with that?
Yes. When I started doing the keynote presentations for Western National Parks Association. They had a beautiful auditorium projection system, so I started to put programs together for them. I had 4 or 5 when I left. I'm up to 14 now. I've been developing them since I've been back. In fact, I started before I moved. As I had contacted the Story Circle, I started doing research and reading materials and stories from this area. I start both Tribes of Arizona and Tribes of New York with the ice bridge. That's a scientific theory about how Native American people came across the bridge. And depending on the expert that you're listening to, you're talking 13 to 15,000 to 30,000 years ago, doing that sort of thing. That is separate from Native American creation stories. They have their creation stories, and they differ from place to place, as creation stories differ from world to world, around. But I have often heard Native voices say, if they're smart enough to think that is the way everyone came, why are they not smart enough to think that maybe we walked that way?
Yes.
Yes. What is clear to some is not clear to others. Yes, strangely enough.
Well,
Yes.
And it's a bit of a mystery, because there are, as you know, there are places in the tip of South America that kind of predate the bridge, and there's all these questions about how they could have gotten down there.
Yes.
It remains to be seen, but it goes to show you that the human mind and perseverance can get wherever they need to go. I mean, I guess
There's
that's the
a
thing.
PBS special on 11 other theories about who was here before Columbus, visiting the indigenous people. It's
Yeah,
It's amazing at the questions they raise. No one has the answer, but they have very good questions.
for example, why does the Peking duck and the Mexican tortilla look a lot alike?
All right.
Fairly significant evidence that the Chinese were in Mexico, visiting and trading in the 1200s.
They either, someone came here, or someone from here went there, or there was an intermediary. There was a trade route, and they traded things that wound up there. These things were too big to be brought accidentally by a bird in a seed dropped here, so we grow something that was from another continent. But there are sweet potatoes, which is a South American crop in Polynesia, genetically the same as sweet potatoes in Peru. How'd that happen?
Well, let's see. I have a story. What is it about? It's about Ireland, the Aran Islands, and there they have all kinds of. The Aran Islands are like rock. That's rock with a little bit of soil sprinkled on top. The soil is about 8 inches deep, and so no trees grow there. Bushes, large bushes grow there, but also plants from the Arctic and plants from the Mediterranean. That if they could find a nice little wedge of dirt in a nice protected area, so that the winds sweeping in, what's better than sweeping?
Coursing.
Trucking in, from the Atlantic. If they can get a protected one, they flourish. So orchids bloom on this rock, and what I read was it was just the winds that brought them, the seeds. But
that wind, bird, they're some seeds are airborne, some seeds are carried by a host.
We know dandelion seeds.
But then there are other things that, if you look back, that's not the way the ocean currents and the wind currents go. So they wouldn't have been brought by chance. Someone brought them, or someone took them.
Or they had to go around the long way with the winds, which is, that's kind of dubious, yes.
Well, the continents have changed.
Oh, right.
With climate change. So when we were in what would have been our ice age, ocean voyagers from China and Polynesia would have followed land masses and stayed closer to shore so they could get fresh water, they could get fresh food, and they could adventure as far as they wanted. And some say they did to South America and Peru.
Well, I guess this should be a 2-hour show, but it is still only a 1-hour show, and we have 34 seconds left to say goodbye, and to thank our guest, Gil Payette.
Well, thank you, Gil, for all that you've brought us with your stories and the story of the stories. It's been a great show. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope we'll see you again back here next month. Good night, Kate.
Good day, Joe.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round